Hi everyone, this is Lisa from Stamp a Rainbow, and today I'm going to show you how you can make these 3 cards with just a few products. If you're a beginner stamper or if you have limited supplies, it's hard to know exactly what to buy. There's millions of stamps out there and so many different kind of inks. I'm going to show you what to buy so that you can make these cards and many more, and to start growing your stamping supply collection. These are the supplies that I use to make the cards and what I recommend if you're getting started as a beginner stamper. The stamp set that I'm using is a layering iris stamp set from Hero Arts. The ink cubes are also from Hero Arts, and all 4 of them come together in one pack. This awesome pack of embellishments is only about $6 from Amazon, and just look at all the colors that you get. It's really perfect for a beginner stamper or someone who just doesn't have a lot of supplies right now. The reason I'm recommending this stamp set is because it is a layering stamp set. All of the instructions for it are on the back, and it's really easy to do. You'll stamp different images on top of each other with different colors, and the inks correspond super. This might sound like it's more of an advanced technique, but believe me, it's really perfect for a beginner because you get such a beautiful card, and no one's really going to believe that you're just starting out. The first card we're going to make is a 1-layer card, and it means just that. We are going to stamp right onto the card base. So you're going to need a white card base. I have all of these measurements on my blog, stamparainbow.com. You're going to need to get a stamp block. These can be found very cheaply on Amazon, but you're going to need a clear stamp block. We're going to stamp 2 irises onto the front of this card. So the first thing we're going to do is take the solid piece, and this is right on the directions on the back of this stamp set. These are the 3 colors that we're going to use to layer onto the iris, and I'm going to go with the lightest first and then proceed to the darkest color. The lightest one is the pale tomato, so I'm going to just go ahead and ink up this stamp with some of the pale tomato. Once you get it good and inked up, go ahead and stamp it right down onto the card base. Press down and then lift straight up. You can see the beautiful image that it creates, and you can also see that there are some blank spots so that the other stamps are going to fill that in. Go ahead and ink up the stamp again, and we're going to go ahead and stamp that down onto the card, putting it slightly above and to the right of that iris. Press down and pull up, and there you've got the 2 irises. Now we're going to do the second layer. The second layer is kind of like filling it in a little bit more, and I'm using the strawberry ink for that. So go ahead and ink that up just like we did the first stamp. And then when we line it up with the first iris, you can see that there's a hole, a blank spot in the middle. And you can see that you can line it up with the petals of the flower. It's really quite easy to do with the clear acrylic block. Now go ahead and ink up the stamp again, and we're going to stamp it over the second iris. Get it good and covered, and then we're just going to line it up just like we did the first. Line it up all around the petals, and then press down when you're ready, and then pull it straight back up. Now you can see the iris is starting to get some shading, and it's really just a beautiful stamp set. Now we're going to use the last stamp for the iris, and that one is going to be, we're going to use the raspberry jam on top of that one. Ink that up. This one is kind of more like an outline of the iris, and it just fills in the whole thing. So the same way, line it up. This one's easy to line up all around the iris, the shape of it. Press it down and pull it up. And then we're going to do the same again with the second iris. Just fill that in, and then put it over the iris, line it up, press it down, and then just pull straight up. Super, super easy to do. But look at these irises. Look at how beautiful they look. Now, if you look at the back of the stamp set, you'll see that there's a middle part and there's a middle stamp. They stamped it in yellow, but we are only using these three colors. So I'm going to use the raspberry jam to stamp this center section. It's very easy, just line it up over the spot that doesn't have any ink and the outer edges kind of go over the petals and just stamp it down. Now if you have other inks, you could use a yellow, but since I'm only using these colors, I just want to keep it with these colors just to show you what you can do with this stamp set and the colors. Now we're going to stamp the stem and the leaves, and if you can see, there's two stamps for the stem and three stamps for the leaves, but we only have one green, the moss. So I'm going to show you a technique called stamping off. First of all, ink up the stem and get a scratch piece of paper and then stamp it down. Now stamp it onto the card. That's going to create a lighter image so that when we do the second layer, that one is darker and shows up better. I'm lining that one up exactly where I want it. I'm inking that up and then stamp off onto the scratch piece of paper and then stamp it onto the card. Okay, now you're going to get the second layer of the stem, which is kind of the outer edge. Now we're going to ink that up, but I'm not going to stamp off because I want to use this with all of the ink on it so that it's darker and it shows two layers onto the stem. Stamp it down. Can you see the two differences there? This is a great way to do different shading if you only have one ink pad. Do the same thing with the second stamp. Ink it up and stamp it down onto the stem. Now we're doing the leaves, and there's three leaves, so we're actually going to stamp off twice with the first layer. The first layer is the solid one, so ink that up with the moss, and then I'm going to use the scratch paper and I'm just going to stamp off twice, and I actually kind of did it half of it, which is also a neat technique because if you look at this leaf, it looks like it has some shading on it. I really like the way that turned out. Didn't really do that on purpose. Ink the second leaf up and I stamped off twice on that one and stamped it down onto the card. There's really no way to make mistakes with this stamp set. It's got a really pretty watercolor feel. The next stamp for the leaves is kind of the veins of the leaf. So ink that up. Now, I should have just stamped off once, but for some reason I stamped off twice. So as you can see, when I stamp this one down, there's really just a little bit of a difference. So I inked it up again, and I stamped off twice again, but normally you would just stamp off once. But this one I didn't stamp off quite as much ink, and so you can see that there's a difference. The last layer is the outline of the leaf and a vein going right down the middle, and you're not going to stamp off at all on that one. Stamp it down on top of the leaf, and then we're going to repeat that for the other leaf. And if you look closely, you can see that it isn't lined up perfectly, and I really like that because it makes this whole thing look very watercolor-like and natural. Okay, so now we're going to do the sentiment. This stamp set has 3 sentiments and they're great for just everyday use. So I am going to use the "You Are the One to Admire" on this card. I'm showing you one each of the sentiments on each of the cards. I used the strawberry ink. I inked that up and I just stamped it down onto the card. Next, for some embellishments. You can leave this card as it is. I think it's really pretty without anything, but it's always fun to add some sparkle and shine. And this embellishment set is awesome because it has so many different colors and 3 shapes of each color, and it's very inexpensive. The other bonus is that it's self-adhesive, so that all you have to do is peel it off and stick it onto the card. So I just took this color and I just kind of dabbled on 2 on the bottom, a couple up a little bit further, and then a couple on the top. There's really no set plan on embellishments. Just kind of do what you want to do. And there you go. We're finished with the first card. The second card that we're going to do has a couple layers, so you're going to need some adhesive with this one. I use this Gina K tape runner, but any tape runner type adhesive will work. We're going to take the largest square. It is cut at 4x4, and we're going to use the stem to make a pattern on the cardstock. This is another way that you can stretch your stamps. Take a look at your stamps. Some of them might look great as background stamps and different ways that they are intended to be used. I'm going to take the moss ink and I'm going to ink up this stamp, and I'm going to stamp it in a way so that the top part of the stem is off of the paper so that I just get that straight line. I'm going to speed this up because I'm going to stamp it all the way across. I am not measuring this. I'm eyeballing it and just stamping the best I can. I'm going to flip it over and then stamp the other side. It doesn't matter that they're not meeting because this is not going to show in the final card. And there you go. You've got a pretty patterned piece of paper by just using one of your stamps that was intended to be a stem. Now we're going to stamp the sentiment on the smaller square. This square is cut at 3x3. All of the measurements are on my blog. I'm shaping it as a diamond shape, and I'm going to ink it up. I am using the I Smile a Little Brighter Because of You, and I'm using the strawberry ink, and I'm stamping it in the right corner of the diamond shape. Now I'm going to use the last step of the iris to do a pattern around the sentiment. I'm using the pale tomato ink, and I'm going to ink that up. Again, this is another way to use your stamps in a different way than they were intended. I'm using it as a pattern, so I'm just going to stamp it around my sentiment. Started at the bottom, and the way this shape is, it fits really well together, kind of like a puzzle. Now I'm going to ink it up again, and I'm going to stamp it on the side, lining up the side of the iris with the top of the other iris. So it forms a pattern around the diamond shape. Now ink it up a third time, and we're going to complete the pattern on the top by lining it up so that it's next to the second one, but not over the sentiment. Like I said, it kind of fits like a little puzzle, and it forms a very pretty little pattern. Stamp that down, and there you go. You've got that square almost complete. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of something to the edge. I took the raspberry jam and I'm just scraping it along the edge of the square. This is just going to give it a little bit of color on the card so that it's not so white, because there is a lot of white space on the card. I went twice on each side, and then I went around the square again one more time. So it's basically scraping it 3 times around each edge. Okay, so now we're ready to put the card together. I'm using the tape runner, and I'm just going to attach the striped layer to a regular size white card base. I lined that up in the middle of the card and pressed it down. And now I'm going to attach the next layer. Use the tape runner adhesive. Also, if you don't have a tape runner, you could use liquid glue that's safe for paper. That's fine too. And if you are a little bit more advanced, have more supplies, and have some dimensionals or ways to pop up, you could do that. I'm lining that up like so, and as you can see, that's why it's covering the middle lines. I didn't have to worry if my little stripes were connected. Now I think the card looks great like this, but if we want to add some embellishments, I just took some of the deep purple color, and I put it right in the center of each of the irises. I thought that that was a good way to give it some sparkle and shine, and just kind of like a little subtle touch to give it some brightness. And there you go. That is card number 2. The last card that we're going to make is a 2-layer card. Take the top layer, and that's cut at 5 1/4 by 4, and we're going to use a technique by using the ink cube and stamping it directly onto the paper. I'm going to create a border by just swiping the ink across the paper. I don't know what this technique is called, but I call it ink swiping. I kind of just made that up. So I'm starting off with a thin line, and I'm going to slide it across all 4 edges. I'm doing this lightly, but the ink is turning pretty dark. This is the strawberry I'm using. I like the little lines that you get from swiping. It looks like you're painting it with a brush. So I'm going over the edges again, making the border a little bit wider. Now I'm not going to worry if one side is bigger than the other, or if they're not even. I'm going to just do the best I can to make it look good, and then the key too is to stop when you think it looks good enough, or else you can probably just keep swiping all the time. Swiping onto the top again just to try to get that one a little bit as wide as the bottom. Now I'm going to take the raspberry jam, and I'm very lightly swiping this across the whole thing. This is just giving it some added color and some depth. There you go. Just swipe as much as you want. And like I said, just stop so that it doesn't get totally blended together. And there you go. There's my frame. Now I'm going to create a flower just like I did on the first card. So I'm zooming past this because I used the exact same technique and the exact same colors. For the stem, I want to put the stem on the card, but I don't want the stem to go over the frame. So I'm using this purple tape. I have a link to it below. It's like painter's tape, but it's safe for cards and it's not going to peel away the ink. Put a couple of pieces of the purple tape where you don't want the ink to be. I'm going to ink up the stem with the moss, and then I'm going to stamp off because, as you remember, this is a 2-layer stamp, and I want the first layer to be lighter, and stamp it down just right on top of the purple tape. Get the second layer, ink that up, don't stamp off, and stamp down onto the top of the stem. Now we're going to do the leaf the same way that we did on the first card. Ink up the first layer. I'm stamping off twice because there are 3 layers to this leaf. So I'm going to stamp that down. As you can see, it's very light. Then I'm going to use the second step, stamp it off once, stamp it onto the leaf, and then use the third step to the leaf. I actually re-stamped the second step because I felt like I didn't get it dark enough. Then I'm going to take the third step and stamp it straight onto the leaf without stamping off at all. Now as you can see, when you tear off the tape, it looks like the flower is behind the frame. Okay, so for this card, I'm using the Hello Friend sentiment, and I'm stamping it with the raspberry jam. So I'm just going to line it up in the bottom right-hand corner and stamp it down. I think the card looks great just like that. As you notice, I did not do the middle of the iris. I decided to leave that blank on this card. You could stamp the middle if you want. Take your tape runner or liquid adhesive and tape that panel onto a regular white card base. Now you could leave it just as it is, or you could add some embellishments. since I decided to leave the middle unstamped, I decided just to grab one of the little gemstones and put it in the middle of the card. And there you go. That's card number 3. I hope you enjoyed this video and learning how to make these cards with limited products. I also hope you enjoyed the techniques that I shared today. Please visit my blog, stamparainbow.com, for more card ideas and for the measurements and any product information that you might have missed here. I'd appreciate it if you could like my videos and follow me on YouTube. And thanks so much. Have a good day.